This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
The young shining cuckoo is fed by its foster parents on insects and spiders. But the korimako, or bellbird, has a much more interesting diet of nectar. It's been something of a radio personality and has sung on shortwave radio to Australia and the Pacific nations for 30 years. However, the early recordings failed to reflect the versatility of the bellbird, with its wide variety of liquid notes and artistically placed clicks and bell-like sounds. It's not surprising that Maori mythology describes korimako, the bellbird, as the messenger of Tane, sent to herald the coming of the sun.
Community or chaos? We can construct and nurture community or fall into chaos. Over the next hour, Marvin Hubbard hosts conversations toward creating a fairer, more equal society.
Community or Chaos is made possible with the support of Quakers Aotearoa. You'll find them online at quaker.nz.
Good morning, friends. We're fortunate to have Mayor Sophie Barker with us today. Welcome to Community or Chaos, Sophie.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Well, what motivated you to become involved in local body politics?
I guess it's kind of a crazy thing. I don't think of myself as a politician. I was working out at the Royal Albatross Centre for the Otago Peninsula Trust and got very interested, of course, in conservation and the environment. And I also got quite frustrated with the council itself and how it wasn't carrying out its own strategies and plans. And I thought that perhaps if I got into a position of influence, then I could make some changes or help to make some changes and make sure that the city went on a good pathway forward to protect the things that we love.
So you've been involved in the council for some time before you stood for mayor.
Yes, it's true. Well, I'd actually worked there back in 2008, I think it was, to 2015. I worked in the economic development unit, so I knew a bit about council. And then before I stood for mayor, I was a councillor for around 6 years. So I certainly learnt a lot about the systems and processes. I think that people, when they want to stand for council or go for council, think it's just X, and then you end up knowing it's the whole alphabet because it's an incredibly complex organisation.
Yes, and I guess there's strategies for influencing things, but also for dealing with the staff who actually have to do the work and provide information.
Yes, and I think that's where we as governance have to be really clear about what we want to achieve and the outcomes for our city, because we had at one stage around 40 strategies and they're just all over the place. So that strategic suite was made into about 8 strategies, but part of the challenge is that they do get kind of put on the shelf and turned dusty. So then where are you going and what are you doing? You've got to make sure that you have a really clear plan about what you want to achieve, and that's kind of where I'm at.
What are the 8 strategies?
Oh, do you want me to name them?
Yep.
Okay. So we have to have a transport strategy, we have a parks and recreation strategy, an environment strategy, an economic strategy, arts and culture. Why am I blanking on the last one? Arts and culture, environment, we've done that. Oh, now that's good. Parks and recreation, the water strategy. Well, that's
quite important.
Yeah. And then, of course, overarching, we have Te Take Haruru, which is our Māori strategic framework. So it's about how do you get all of those strategies and fit them together so that you've got your, I guess the current vision is one of the world's great small cities. So it's sort of targeted on that. But I think we're looking at, do we need a new city vision as well?
What would be your top 5 goals for you?
Yeah, for me, I'm still fighting for our hospital, so still keeping quite a close eye on that, because I think that we had some surprise announcements from various governments, which are all negative, apart from the one where they actually are going to build it to 11 floors. But we need to make sure that we're still getting the pathology lab in there. So that's one that we are keeping an eye on. And then, of course, making sure that there's good staffing levels and that the traffic flow, that there's parking around those as well. So that's one of my key things. And then the new city vision and master plan, because I think that we need to be looking a decade or so ahead to think about where we want our city to be. My other things are building Dunedin's profile, because, when they talk about the main centres, and now they talk about the 3 main centres, and there are 4, and Dunedin is one of those. So part of what I do is try to get our profile out there, and I'm on the the National Council of Local Government New Zealand, and that's where I certainly advocate for Dunedin. And also we need to build those, another goal is rebuilding partnerships with our locals, with the university, with the Polytech. Recently, or last year, we had the first meeting between the Dunedin City Council and the University Council, and I cannot believe that hadn't been done before, because obviously that town and gown is really important, and then building the relationships with the government as well, because while we might not like what they're doing, we have to get along with them as we can to get in their faces and get some good decisions made at the ground level while they're developing policy. And then my other stuff's around economic development and growth, is how do we make sure that we have a strong and robust economy, because we rely heavily on the government, with education and health being our biggest money makers for the city, I guess you call them, but that's government money, and we need to make sure that we've got good jobs and prospects. And that's a tad selfish, because I have a daughter that I would love to stay in the city. So, we need jobs for our young people.
As a member of the Local Bodies Association, do they have a plan for how to deal with finances and rates? Because it seems to be more of an issue all the time.
Oh, it's a huge issue, and the costs keep going up. There's, they talk about, we'll stick with the CPI, but unfortunately, as council, we're buying pipes and pumps and bitumen and a lot of other things, and bridges, which are all very expensive things. So it's not like you can't make it the equivalent of your grocery shop, shall we say. And it's really, really challenging to just get that money through rates. We try to cut costs where we can, but then I think the good example was last year. I think they cut the budget on cutting the verges, and everyone went up in arms about that because they like the city to look nice and tidy. So we put money back into that, and that's that balance is what services are you going to cut or whatever to try and get that budget balance, because all the prices for us keep going up. The insurance, of course, the property maintenance, the roads, everything. So it's a really tough place to be in. And the government keeps making lots of new laws and rules, which we have to pay staff to interpret, like the planning rules and the RMA changes as well, means that we're going to have to get specialist staff or consultants in to help us to navigate the way through the rules. And we can't say, no, we don't want to do that, because we have to do that work, because we do have to abide by the law. So there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at us by government and by external forces, like what's happening with the fuel now.
I think the government coalition would probably call themselves conservatives. But are they conserving local body infrastructure? And how do you, if I have a house and it's got a roof and the roof leaks badly, and my accountant says, you can't afford to borrow money to fix that roof, my builder friends say, if you don't fix that roof, you won't have a house. So which should I do? Let the house fall apart or borrow money?
You have to borrow the money to fix the roof. But, because I deal a lot with heritage buildings, get the roof fixed. I
think for me, that's looking at all national infrastructure, and we've been not fixing the roof in New Zealand for 30 years.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And one of the things, we actually had a Local Government New Zealand meeting this morning, and local government actually delivers more infrastructure than central government. So central government will go on and on about the infrastructure deficit, and it's actually local councils that are delivering that infrastructure. So it's a huge challenge, especially when the government keeps, targeting local government and putting a lot more costs on them. And if the rates caps come on, it will be quite devastating for our ability to actually look after our infrastructure, look after growth and our services as well. And I don't think they've considered that. They've got some crazy economic model that they've built, which really isn't great.
Actually, they didn't build. The Labour Party built in the 80s.
Yes. Yeah, so
But it seems to me if you have a system or a policy that's not working, and it doesn't work for generations, shouldn't you consider changing it?
Wouldn't you love that? Yes, I mean, there's a huge problem because we're a long, skinny country with not many people, but we have a huge need of infrastructure. So where is the National Infrastructure Plan? At the moment, it falls on councils to deliver a lot of it, and it falls on ratepayers. And Dunedin's more fortunate than some of our neighbours who have small ratepayer bases and huge areas. If you look at somewhere like Clutha, they've only got, I'll say a few thousand ratepayers, but a huge area to cover. So how does that work?
In some ways, I think Dunedin's luckier than some because we actually started working on our water infrastructure and so on a bit earlier than we had to. We didn't wait until we were forced to totally.
Yeah, and that's put us in a better position to go it alone. But, we've still got a lot of debt carried because of that. And I absolutely believe in intergenerational debt because when we look at our water structure, it's supposed to last for 50 to 70 years. So it's not fair for the ratepayer now to pay for it all. It needs to be distributed through. But there's a lot of things that we need to fix. So when we look at the Kettle Park landfill, the fact that we need a new rubbish disposal method, should we call it something like Smooth Hill or whatever, those are hugely expensive things that we have to do. I call us kind of the fix-up council as we keep on having to sort things out. South Dunedin Future, whatever we do there, that's going to cost a lot of money as well. It's not simple fixes.
Does the Local Body Association have any plans for actually making the local bodies more financially secure and able? The local bodies are expected to do many more things probably than in the past, yet they have less money, if anything.
So we've talked about the visitor levy, so that currently because a lot the visitors, they create a huge amount of billions of dollars of export dollars, should we call it, but they also put a huge amount of pressure, especially on those smaller councils. So we were talking about accommodation levies or the international visitor levy. So that was supposed to go into visitor infrastructure, but the government kind of sucked that money up into general funds, which is very uncool. We were also talking about maybe getting some of the GST back or the government paying rates on Crown land as well. So there's various ideas about funding and financing tools to try and take the burden off the ratepayers. And then I guess maybe looking at an NZTA model for other infrastructure as well, where the government chips in maybe 50% on some of the infrastructure.
Should the rates and the ambitions, but also the necessities for local bodies be part of the election process?
You mean the local body election process or the national one?
National.
National. I think so. I think that what it looks like at the moment is that central government is, the cost of living is the huge thing for people, but central government is kind of putting a lot of the blame on local government and using the rates cap as a election thing rather than trying to solve the issues, which are very complex.
Well, maybe they should look at what they're doing. Like every year, ordinary people pay more for electricity, And this is particularly important in the South where it's cold. And the cost of electricity goes up. And for the generators of electricity, which the stakeholders, including the government, but also private people who collect dividends, well, when there's a crisis in electricity, they actually make more money. And they haven't built for the future, and they haven't built for climate change, and they haven't built for using less carbon. And that creates more uncertainty and also makes rates more and more for electricity more unaffordable. So is privatizing the answer?
Privatising is not the answer, that's for sure. We do, it is said that there's Commerce Commission oversight of the electricity, but I remember reading when government was busy cutting all of the staff, remember by 7%, they cut quite a few staff out of the Commerce Commission. So I do wonder how when they've cut staff out of the Commerce Commission, how they're actually supposed to manage the electricity. And we haven't invested wisely as a country, I think. We should be looking a lot more at solar and wind power and making ourselves resilient. And the current fuel crisis has certainly pinpointed that. I was listening to National Radio the other day, and they were talking about different countries and what their percentage of EVs was. And New Zealand is terrible at their percentage of EVs, which we should have been investing in to make us more resilient to the petrol and diesel shocks, because of course we are a little island far away from everything else.
Actually, they've done the opposite.
Yeah.
Should we actually be investing not only in EVs, but also in rail and electrifying it where possible, and more public transport generally?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's just the sensible way of getting people around, isn't it?
Ordinary people can't afford electric cars, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I bought mine, which is pretty old, doing all of the sums. And it was there's a certain point when they get cheap enough that you can make it worthwhile. But now that with road user charges, it's certainly making it a whole lot more expensive, because you do the numbers. It's basic economic behaviour, but actually they are more expensive to buy.
If you had enough energy, non-carbon energy, solar panels, wind power, wave power, to cover our electricity needs, most of the time, you could save the hydroelectric power for times of crisis instead of going to Huntley and gas and coal, which, and also, we should really look at how we run our electricity, shouldn't we?
Yeah, and I think that's where the country, we might, I hate to say Rob Muldoon and think big, but actually we should have been thinking big about not quite in the way that he did, perhaps, but about how we manage our energy future. And it takes some brave, sensible decisions to do those things as well. And that's the challenge with the government. I keep recycling things, I think, and not making those really hard decisions, which do need to be made to make sure that we've got a resilient future.
What is the relationship between local bodies and the government, and how has that relationship changed since you've been noticing politics?
Yeah, as I said, I'm not a super political person, but I guess this government campaigned on localism, and they're like, we'll devolve decision-making down to the locals, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, seem to have gone after local government as this source of all challenges, and be looking at amalgamations, etc. So that's been really hard, because I just remember coming in as mayor, and I think we had about 17 different laws that were changing, and we were doing all of these submissions to government because they're just trying to slam a whole lot of changes through, and we just couldn't see what is the picture. So you've got huge amounts of changes and you can't see how they all fit together. I think that we've been working on those relationships with central government. I certainly have with the ministers that I meet and trying to advocate for our city. But I think it's really hard when there's a coalition government as well with some very differing views. I was thinking Shane Jones.
We're always going to have coalition governments from now on in the future, I imagine, because of MMP. Maybe we haven't really figured out how MMP should work.
Possibly not. It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes it feels like the majority or the biggest party is being held to ransom by the smaller parties, and I don't know if that's how it works overseas or if there's. I actually don't know. I haven't researched it.
How does it affect Dunedin when the government affects local body plans?
That's going to be huge for us because, it is going to be huge for us. And we were just talking about that with the local government New Zealand is about when the RMA changes come through, is that how will we be able to protect our heritage buildings, because there's this thing called regulatory relief. So we might have to pay people for if we've got listed buildings or listed trees, and I don't think we'll be able to afford to do that, quite frankly. So how do we protect our heritage? And then also how do we protect our main street and keep it beautiful main street that it is, because we have quite not complicated. We have a lot of different zonings, and the government's going to simplify it to maybe 10 zones and then allow people to do not quite whatever they like, but nearly whatever they like within those. So you think about when people are building new buildings in the middle of town, and as a city we want them to fit in with the landscape, etc. And the government are busy going, well, they could just do what they like. It's not effects-based anymore. So that's a real concern to us about how our city grows and what it looks like.
Dunedin's one of the few major centres in New Zealand that has managed to keep a city centre alive and well, and not have shopping malls way off in the suburbs draining everything from the city and making the city into a slum. How do you keep that going? And how do you make the government understand, also the voters understand, that local bodies actually probably need more influence, not less influence over...
Yeah, so we're working with local government New Zealand. We've had a bit of a reset there, and I think I was having a meeting with the metros, that's the big cities, this morning, and they were bringing up the same. Palmerston North has the same issues with their centre city, their heritage buildings, property developers, land banking, and leaving gaps in their cities. So to us, we need to work as a local government sector to talk to government about what the impact of their decisions are, because I guess they actually probably don't necessarily understand when they're making these decisions what it could do, because it would be horrific if we got shopping malls everywhere and didn't keep our centre city vibrant and alive, because that's what brings people in. Our students that come and live here, it's the quality of life and the beautiful city centre that's easy to get around, that's important to them. So we do need to protect that, and we do need to advocate to government to protect it as well.
If the market's the only thing important to your policy, they may not consider things like that. I mean,
no.
The Act's anti-registration legislation and a regulation legislation.
Oh, yeah.
And it's noticeable that that department is actually more well paid and more staffed than many other departments. But if you have the idea that the market will fix everything, then you're not going to care much about local bodies and what happens, because things are going to come right, because the market will take care of it.
No, that's just rubbish. I think we all know that.
I mean, this is one reason I brought up the privateation of electricity, because we know how that's worked.
Mm-hmm.
We've all felt it.
Yeah, the market doesn't take care of us. We all know that.
Don't we need to change direction nationally?
Yeah, I think that certainly that Ministry of Regulation, it's, the rules are there for a reason, and that is to protect the things that we value. And we all have agreed on those rules, especially locally. We've gone out to a lot of consultation and made decisions about what our community wants. And I think that a lot of the government regulation, or trying to get rid of regulation, is riding a bit roughshod over what our community actually wants for our city.
How's the local body, or how's the city council actually functioning now? You've been in the paper a bit.
Yeah, I think, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, quite frankly, coming in as mayor. We've had 6 new councillors, and we've tried to bring them up to speed. We had 20 training events before Christmas. Most councillors went to all of them. I've got a few councillors that have 100% attendance. So that's challenging to train people around governance and what governance means and how to be a good councillor. And then, of course, we had Jules pass away in January, which was a huge, awful shock. And that's been a challenge, having a by-election going on, because it's creating a lot of noise. We have a lot of work that we need to be getting on with, quite frankly. I mean, there's obviously one councillor that's causing cataclysmic noise, and it's just wasting a lot of time when we're trying to go through the recruitment process for the CEO. We've got the by-election, we've got our annual plan, we're coming up to a 10-year plan. We have to think about how we respond to the government changes, and we really don't need the sort of behaviour that is taking the focus off where we're going as a city.
How can you deal with that? Because people get elected democratically, yet once they're there, they need to actually work together with the council, and if they don't, it's difficult. But it's also difficult to know what to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, the code of conduct, we don't have bus tickets anymore. I was explaining to my daughter about a wet bus ticket and code of conduct, and she's like, what's a bus ticket? So I'm like, a B card. But anyway, that's the challenge, is how do you manage that? One would assume that, when people get elected, it's because they are sound, responsible citizens. And there's a challenge around that whole election thing, I guess. But the majority of the councillors work hard, very sensible, and doing a great job. It's just occasional rogues that are making too much noise while the rest of us actually get on and do the work.
Councils can make poor economic and financial decisions. I'm thinking at Forsyth Stadium. I mean, many people were predicting the kind of situation we're now in as far as whether it would be making money or costing the council. We have it now. How do we deal with it? I mean, you throw as much money in it as you can and hope that fixes it, or
we just have to, we've got it, we have to use it sensibly. I was at Moana Nui over the weekend at the stadium, and it was amazing. There were thousands of people there. It was a sunny day, which always helps. Beautiful music, and I'm like, this is what it should be. It should be used by the community, because we shouldn't have an asset with a 50-year lifespan or whatever sitting there unused. So the challenge is how to get it used. I think there's an idea about putting the curtain in it, which I think is a great idea, so that then we could attract some different events to it. But I think that the community use, to me, is the thing that actually speaks to me. It's the community in the end that are paying for it, and they should have good use of it. I mean, it is a real challenge, and it was a challenge at the time. I could foresee that too. Everyone kind of jumped on the bandwagon about it. And we left, as I said, the Fix It Council. It's like, you cannot have it sitting there like a white elephant. We have to use it, and we have to think smartly about how to use it.
But you also have to be careful that you don't over budget.
Oh, absolutely. We can't keep pouring money into it. That's the challenge, is finding that sensible balance.
How about the city council and the fuel shortage that we're facing? I mean, are we taking the fuel shortage seriously enough? Because we assume that it's going to end in a couple of months, but we don't really know. In fact, we know because of the political situation, also because of the leadership of the United States right now. We have no real idea. It could go for a month or two, or it could go for until next year.
Yep, huge challenge. We've got business continuity plans ourselves, so we've looked internally and have got plans, but then we see what the government's doing as well. We will get hit by it, and I am very concerned about the costs that we'll get hit by as well. You know, how do we mow our lawns or basic things like that, keep our pools going. We have been, because of our carbon zero plan, we have been changing over a lot of our reliance on diesel and fuel. So I think that's helpful, but it's very challenging because it will push up costs, and then what are we going to do about our ability to deliver services? So there's some pretty serious talks that we're going to have to be having about the reliance on fuel as well.
Friends, we're talking with Mayor Sophie Barker about City Council and Dunedin's needs, and you can podcast this by going to Or Radio F, and then going to podcasts, and then going to Community or Chaos. Sophie, what should we try to... I know that Dunedin doesn't actually run the bus services. It's a regional council that runs it directly. But are you working with the regional council on buses? And is there a consideration of making buses free during this situation where the cost of petrol is going to go up and we could actually run short? I suppose diesel is one of the problems. I guess it would have been better if we could electrify more buses sooner.
Yeah, because I can't remember. I remember going on their first electric bus. So picture keeps popping up in my memories, and I'm not quite sure how many electric buses the ORC has. I mean, with the changes that the government's looking around regional councils, I really hope that we will get the buses back, because that might help us be able to manage our transport in a more integrated way. And I certainly take on board about the free buses, and I think we'll be advocating to government to help with that, because they have a fare box thing at the moment where the government puts money in, but also if something's free, then someone has to pay for it somewhere along the way. And I know that currently our ORC rates go towards subsidising the buses, so that's something we need to talk about. And I also think that the ORC has to do a much better job on marketing the buses, because I don't see it out there. I think that people have sometimes a bit of prejudice around buses. It's the reliability, the frequency, etc. So I think there's a much better marketing job and advocacy that needs to be done to get people on buses and for them to see them as a great form of transport.
In Mosgiel, the bus, they have an orbiter bus that goes around Mosgiel. And also you can call for it. Should the regional council, be looking at more of that kind of thing as part of marketing? And also, it seems to me, because of the crisis, if you had free buses, that would be a way of marketing buses.
True, yes. I don't know how because I think it was a trial in Mosgiel around the orbiting buses, as they call them. So I'm not quite sure how that's working. I think that the thing is to keep buses regular and reliable, and if they were free, that would make a huge difference. I know with gold card holders that's a huge difference. My mum uses the bus occasionally on that, and things like the bus hub needs to be addressed, as well as the safety around there, because I know how my 84-year-old mother feels around some of those challenges as well. But they do need to, I think the free buses would be great marketing, but they also need to make sure that people know how to use the buses easily, and that it's a great form of transport.
So the local bodies will be hopefully encouraging the government to consider free buses.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that out there.
How is South Dunedin feeling, not only about floods, but their future? And do they feel consulted?
Hopefully they do feel consulted. We won an award for it. There's certainly a lot of work been going on for a lot of number of years. And I know that people are frustrated because there isn't an instant solution. But South Dunedin is incredibly complicated because it's a little bit like a basin. I mean, it was a swampland, and they've spent a lot of time doing the science behind South Dunedin, so discovering around the water tables, around whether the tide affects things, the water coming down from the hills, etc., what pipes and pumps we've already got, how much water they can cope with, all sorts of things. A huge amount of science has gone into figuring the stuff out, and then also a lot of consultation with the locals. We had 7 futures, which have got down to 3 futures, and we are soon going to go out to consultation on those. And there's a real challenge around South Dunedin. You know, it goes on the spectrum from retreat to do nothing, and neither of those are acceptable. So it's trying to find the best long-term solution, because one of the worst things we could do is invest a whole lot of money now that in 10, 15 years sinks, literally. So we need to make sure that we're making really good decisions. And I know people are impatient, and I know they feel incredibly stressed every time it rains, and we have huge challenges over that. But everyone is working really hard to find good solutions for that area.
It seems to me you've got 2 problems, South Dunedin. You've got rising from sea levels, and that can sometimes feel like the never, never.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the pipes and so on really aren't up to scratch.
Yeah, so rising sea levels, you know, that happens so incrementally that some people just don't believe in it. Yeah. And that's a challenge, because actually it is happening and it is a problem. It's a problem for all of our coastal areas. So it's not just South Dunedin. We've got a huge coastline and we need to be looking right along it. And the other thing is, of course, about the pipes and the pumps. When you consider when they were built and what they were built for, was a much smaller population, and now we've had a lot of intensive housing built there, and a lot of businesses going there, etc. So that's created a lot of stress on the system, and that's a real challenge, because pipes and pumps are not cheap, and that's what we need to think through as well. Is what are the best interventions so that we can keep it able to be livable for a certain period of time.
It seems to me that while you can plan for the raising sea level and so on, the pipes and pumps and drainage have to be worked on in the present.
Yeah, and then we were having a discussion this morning with the metros, is when does local government pull out of supplying services to places? I mean, the government is a bit like, the market will take care of it, and once places become uninsurable, then people will pull out. But that doesn't seem very responsible, quite frankly, is that we have to look after our community. So I understand that people want pipes and pumps now, but we also have a responsibility to all of the ratepayers to make sure that we invest sensibly. So we've got is it $30 million? Sorry, I don't have the figures in front of me. We are investing tens of millions of dollars into the pipes and pumps in the next couple of years to make sure that we are making good interventions, and then looking at the long-term solutions, which involve mixes of pipes and pumps. I think it was in confidential, but it'll be out. Those the 3 futures and what they look like will be out soon.
I was talking with Jonathan Boston, who's a university professor in government in Victoria, and he thinks that not insuring and making sure that property and housing is insured for the future is unethical. We have the government has an ethical obligation to not just depend on the market when it comes to sea level rise and other situations like that. That it's not just a political decisions or beneficial.
Yeah, and that's really challenging, because I think there was, who was giving me an example, was it Auckland, I think, about that a developer had come in, wanted to build some houses somewhere. The local government planning rules said, no, you can't build houses there because it's a floodable place. And they went to the Environment Court. The developers won. They built the houses. The houses flooded. The local government had to pay. So there's some real challenges around there. And when you're talking about the ethical thing, that's really hard as well when, we might have had planning rules in places and then they've been overcome or overruled by developers and the court. That's going to be really challenging as well. And Queenstown had an example about the fast track. I think 8,000 houses being built in a place where they didn't have the infrastructure, so the ratepayers get knocked with that. So there's a whole lot of balance and a whole lot of challenge, and I think that people need to be aware also when they're building places. Yeah, that ethical is really challenging. And do insurance companies behave ethically?
Not necessarily, but also they can't really insure something that's going to flood very soon.
Yeah.
And I think the insurance companies and the government have to both be in play. And if the government decides that the market should decide and that you should have fewer regulations, and if a company wants to build houses in a flood zone, why let them? What you forget is when your company builds a subdivision, they're a new house, a good-looking, people willing to pay maybe $1 million or more per house. And then the subdivision has been sold. The company is not there after they've sold them. So they don't need to worry about the long term or even the medium term. All they have to need is to build the houses as best they can and then sell them. Yet the community and actually the government ethically needs to be concerned about.
Yeah. And that's when they rip away the rules and let people build in places like that, and then local government and the ratepayers have to pick the tab up and buy the houses out.
Shouldn't that be challenged, really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what, local government New Zealand's certainly looking at, is that we do get left to pick up the pieces, and the rules and the regulations are there for good reasons, and that's to protect people.
Can local bodies be expected to keep up infrastructure if rates are capped and no other solutions available?
Well, the answer has to be no, unfortunately, because we cannot afford to do it. Because if we borrow money, we'd have to cut our capital program, because all the money that we borrow then has interest attached to it, plus depreciation, which goes straight into the operational costs, which are rates. So the logical thing for us to do as a council would be to cut our capital projects, which is our infrastructure. So we have explained that to government. We're like, if you put the rates cap on, this is ridiculous, because we will not be able to build infrastructure. Because you can borrow, but if you borrow, then you have to pay interest plus depreciation on your capital works, etc., and the operational costs, which then you can't afford. So it's a big stuff up.
In a way, doesn't this go back to national government? Because in the late 80s, the government actually passed legislation saying, I think it's one of the few countries, maybe the only one, where governments passed legislation saying we can't borrow and we can't raise bonds. But they've done that, and they're unwilling to say maybe we were wrong. Maybe the government should go into debt, because when government goes into debt, they can get cheaper rates than local bodies or private borrowers. And if they're building something necessary like drainage of swamps or hospitals or things that are going to be viable and useful 50 years from now. Well, in that 50 years' time, those debts will be repaid and you'll have the infrastructure and be able to use it. Whereas if you don't keep your infrastructure up, then you don't have it, and it'll cost you more.
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely true that it's better to invest now and buy things now that will see us into the future than it's sort of someone said kicking the can down the road, and I'm like, we're kicking the grenade down the road because if we don't invest in our infrastructure, we're stuffed. Our future's stuffed.
So shouldn't we be actually suggesting strongly that government should look, and political parties should look at that ruling that the government can't borrow money and can't raise bonds because that's destroying the possibility of preparing for the future.
Yeah. Well, government does need to take a lead in this. And we were talking earlier with the local government New Zealand also about joint procurement and working with government on some of those bigger projects. Because when you consider, I think there's 68 councils of one sort or another, and we're all busy procuring all over the place, like buying bridges and roads and stuff like that. And really, if we got a joined up approach with central government, we'd have much better purchasing power. So we should be working with government to get, that key infrastructure built.
How much cooperation is there between regional bodies?
So we work with the Otago Regional Council, certainly at a staff level, and then we have the Otago Mayoral Forum. So we've had a couple of meetings of that, and we've got 5 new mayors, which is exciting, but also challenging when we've been faced with a deluge of government changes and supposedly supposed to run the regional council as well. And I sound like I'm laughing, but I'm just like, good gracious. We were elected in to do a certain thing. The regional councillors were elected in to do a certain thing. And then we've been thrown quite a curveball. So we do try to work together where we can. And I think it's challenging for Otago because we're over such a wide land area, and we're so different when you consider what Queenstown is and what Queenstown's issues are. They're very different to what Dunedin's issues are as a coastal town. We love each other, but the challenges are what are the things that we can work on together.
How do we encourage people to think about the future and how we organize ourselves for a credible future? I mean, I think economics shouldn't just be about saving money. It shouldn't be just about the market. It should be about how we can make the economy work for the people, work for the future. And there isn't much thinking about that.
Yeah, my degree way back in the 80s was actually an economics degree, so it does interest me greatly. When we were studying economics, we were doing economics of social systems and different forms of economies. I remember the Soviet worker system and the Yugoslav economy, etc. But it's about how do we actually get people to think about those long-term gains rather than short-term gains. And there's always a story about, they do that experiment of the child with the marshmallows in front of them, and whether they eat one marshmallow and save another for later, or they eat both. And that's the problem now, is that we are focused on the here and now, and it takes a lot of good thinking and commitment to think about long-term economies and how we make it better for everyone.
And what you do actually influences things. We lost a lot of manufacturing, particularly in forestry and so on, just recently because of the cost of electricity. So it isn't just the individual who has to pay more for electricity, but also a lot of businesses in the North Island have gone under because of the way our particular system of generating and charging for electricity works. It may work for the benefit of the dividend holder, but not the user.
And that's the challenge. And that's when we look at something like Aurora is, about how do we as a country control our key infrastructure? And I think that's been not well thought out, as you keep open for sale, selling everything off, and then you lose control, and that has a long-term impact, especially around your resilience and your food resilience, which is what's happening with Watties, etc. It's really, really worrying.
I guess the question is how do we educate each other to look at the different options? Because right now we seem to look at just one option. And the future calls for looking at a lot of options.
Yeah, and that's a really hard question, and I think it goes back to better education. I'm going to say the civics education and the thinking at school. Then we start to get people at a younger age to start thinking about these things. And I've been part of, I think it was Generation Vote, going to schools and talking about what council does, because people are not actually educated in civics, what the council does, what the government does, and those impacts, and thinking about that kind of stuff. So we're busy, great, doing lots of maths and science, but it's really important around our political environment, and I don't think we have education about that, and good education about analysing choices. When you think about what people are addicted to nowadays, which is, getting your news off TikTok or wherever, it's really worrying about what that does to people's ability to focus on the future and understand how to make good decisions as well.
One of the things that bothers me a little is when people say that because Dunedin and because New Zealand is small, that we can't do things. When I look at Finland, Finland's got a population close to ours. And what do they have for resources that we don't have? They got logs, they got lakes, but they don't have oil, they don't have coal, they didn't have massive energy. And yet they have one of the most successful welfare states in the world. And they have free education, and from kindergarten to through university, and they have the reputation of the best education in the world. And I wonder if this isn't one of the reasons they're successful economically.
Yeah, or that's something we should aspire to be like, I think, especially around the free education up to those tertiary levels. I was very fortunate to go to university in the 1980s when it was free education, and I think that's really important. And that's something that we should aspire to. I don't think it's an excuse that we're a small country far away. We actually have to change the settings to make sure that we are looking after everyone, and we do have good education and also good future-focused thinking, which I don't think we think about. We're like from one political cycle to another and throwing around, and that makes it, I think you would, with community and chaos you're talking about, maybe we're a little bit on the chaos side rather than the carefully planned side.
Okay. What are your hopes for the future?
Well, somebody did ask me if I had hope for the future the other day. I mean, for me, I definitely want Dunedin to stand up and be ambitious and be proud and be, I think my goal was, the best place to live in New Zealand. So it's all about livability, and a city that works for everyone, and that's about equality and equity as well, as making sure that our city looks after everyone from our young to our old, and that we have a fantastic lifestyle. We all love it here, so let's make it better.
Well, should part of our goal be to make sure that everybody has a home to live in?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I did have the homelessness down as one of my 5 things, and I must have missed that because I hopped from one to another. That's a key thing as well, because we just can't have people living on the streets. Everybody needs safe, warm homes.
It does something not only to the people living on the streets, it also does something to the society that encourages the homelessness.
Yeah, and we have to worry about where our society is at, that it's becoming more of an issue in our city.
It's not like, I think it's a political choice. I don't mean just a local body choice. Yeah. I'm talking a national political choice. Oh,
absolutely. Well, you look at all of the settings about how we're looking after people or not looking after people, about the mental health services, all of those things, the prison services, all of those things.
We haven't always had homelessness.
No, we haven't.
The choice not to be able to build homes, that's a choice.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot for coming on board.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been good to talk with you.
Yeah, lovely spending time with you.
We've been talking with Sophie Barker, the Mayor of Dunedin, and you can go to podcasts and Community or Chaos to listen to this later in the week.
Awesome, thank you. It's always good to be challenged on my thinking.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.